All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Weaponization. This is another episode in the learning path for the red team path on Try Hack Me. Sorry, my dog wanted down. So, anyway, guys, if you guys are enjoying this content, if you guys are enjoying this path, we're starting to get into the more actual hands-on boxes, which I like a lot more, but I do think it's important that you go through and actually learn some of this stuff before you just start doing the hands-on boxes, because it's great if you get that little cert at the end that says you finished the red team path, but if you don't know anything, it didn't help you at all. So without further ado, we'll get started. If you guys haven't already, hit that sub button. It helps out a ton. Also, check out the Patreon. It gets exclusive content. There's a video going out today on the Patreon, and then also the YouTube membership gets those videos as well. The Patreon just gets a little bit more access to notes and things like that. So let's go ahead and hop into it. So first things first, as you notice, we're doing the actual path that they've laid out at the beginning. So we did recon last video. Now we're doing weaponization. I'm assuming the next one's going to be delivery. So what is weaponization? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's how are you going to get your payload to the enemy, right? It's like if you have poison and you're trying to kill somebody, right? If you have poison, and how are you going to get it to them, right? That's what we're doing. We have the payload. We know what we want to do. How do we get it to them? And that's what we're going to cover. And also, how do we get a connection to them back, right? So you can see here, they're explaining that most organizations, Windows operating system is going to be the target. Now, that is pretty typical. It's going to be common that the end users use Windows. I don't know if there's any industry out there where the end users all use Linux. I don't know. I've never seen it. But so, like it said here, an organization's environment policy often blocks downloading executable files, which is true. Most of the time, you cannot just execute files on a Windows machine in a large environment. So here's some of the files that basically you can use sometimes. And again, some of these may be blocked, so keep that in mind. This isn't going to work on everybody. If you try and do this for, a pen test or a red team and all these are blocked, don't be surprised. They're very well known for attacks. All right, so here it says deploy the Windows machine in order to follow along with the content. Okay, so they're just giving us a machine. We're not going to follow along with every single one of them. We are going to do the final task, which is going to have us start one up, but we're not going to do every single one of them. Now, the only reason we're not doing every single one of them is because they all do the same thing, and it's just doing the same thing over and over and over, just in a different way. So I would rather sit here and explain it to you guys in a way that makes sense than actually just sit there and push the buttons and show you. So now, first things first, Windows scripting host. So this is a Windows built-in tool, and you can see here they have it. This is how it's ran on command prompt. It's wscript and then hello.vbs. So the VBS is the Visual Basic Script, and that is what they're labeling the file as. So it's going to recognize it and run it as Visual Basic. Now, you can see here, it's a Windows native engine. So what that means is this is living off the land. It is already on the machine. So you don't have to download anything to get this to run. You don't have to, do anything crazy. As soon as you take that machine, or as soon as you have access to run it, you run it on that machine and boom, it'll run, okay? Now keep in mind, some companies will block these files. So regardless of whether it's on the machine or not, it might be blocked. So you can see they just did this simple Visual Basic script here, message equals welcome to Try Hack Me, and it's a message box. So when you run it, it just pops up, welcome to Try Hack Me. That's it, okay? Pretty simple, pretty easy. So what they're saying here, though, is now let's use Visual Basic Script to run executable files. Okay, cool. So they're saying, well, we can't run executable files just by running them because we're getting blocked, right? We can't download executable files. So if we wanted to have our, end user who we're trying to attack, or our target, if we wanted to have them run an executable, we can't get them to download it and run it because it's blocked. It won't let them run it. But what we could do is we could have them download a Visual Basic script that we make that calls to an executable and runs it that way. And that's what they're saying here. So you can see they said set shell equals wscript, create object, and then the run, and they're running the calculator.exe. Now what they're saying here is if you go ahead and, so you can see they're running it, and then here's the calculator. But what they're saying is, so here you go. Another trick, if the Visual Basic script file is are blacklisted, which is going to be common in a lot of big places, you can rename it to the text and run it as wscript. So you can see, even if it is actually, so you can see right here, this right here, boom. Even if that Visual Basic is blocked, right? Because it's going to be common that the VBS extension is blocked. It's just common. Most companies have some sort of extensions that are blocked, regardless of, even a small company should have blocked extensions, right? And you can see that the Visual Basic might be blocked, but what you can do is you can run wscript and then execute and then run to it. And it's a .text file, so it should be allowed on, but it'll actually run. And then you can see it's actually going to pull up the calculator again. Now, what they're saying here is you can change the calculator.exe to command.exe within the Windows machine and run it that way, and then you actually have a command prompt open. Now, I understand they're showing you, the way they're showing it to you, you have a command prompt, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. But what they're saying is this is a target machine, right? So this is going to run on the target. This isn't something that you're going to run necessarily on your machine. It's something that's going to run on the target, okay? So now we have an HTML application. So if you guys don't know, HTML applications, the way they work is they run when you go to the site, okay? Excuse me. So for instance, it runs in the HTML code. You can see here, here's one right here, command.exe, and then it runs, and that's in the actual code. So if you went to the actual server here, so this is the code, then you go to the actual site and download it, right? As soon as you download it, it's going to say run, open folder. What do you want to do with this, right? Well, it's not an executable. It doesn't recognize it as an executable. It's an HTA file. And once you do that, you can see that it'll actually open up the command prompt, which is what they're talking about. That's all of these examples are going to show them open up the command prompt. That's what their goal is, right? Because the way it works is, let's say you can't open the command prompt yourself. If you can open the command prompt, you can start typing commands, obviously. Just like most places have PowerShell scripts blocked, if you can open the command prompt, you can escalate to a PowerShell shell and go from there, and you can keep moving your way through. Now, okay, let's see. We can create a reverse shell payload as follows. So this is what we're going to end up doing at the end. You can see we're going to do an HTA file. So the way this breaks down is MSF Venom, if you don't know, is Metasploit. It's the way that you can generate payloads. It's going to do it for you. So then the payload is reverse TCP shell. And then the host, that will be us. The port will be whatever port we want it. Then the F is for file or file type. And then it's HTA is the file type. And then the O is it's putting the output to thm.hta. So when you download that, depending on what you do, now we are doing a reverse shell, it will forward that to the website, okay? So what that means is we'll upload this to a website, someone will go to the website, download it, and then run it, not knowing that it's whatever we, think, whatever we say it is. And if the HTA extension is not blocked on their site or on their domain, then they can actually access it, and we have a reverse connection. So on the attacking machine, we need to listen to the port 443. So this is whatever you want. You can see that they used 443 because they used 443 up here. So whatever port you're listening to up here, that's the port you have to set up your listener to. Now, malicious HTA via Metasploit. So this is a little bit different. It's the same thing, but they're using Metasploit to actually use it. You can see it says Metasploit use exploit Windows miscellaneous HTA server. So this is setting up the actual listener rather than using Netcat. They're using Metasploit. And the reason they do this is because Metasploit has many tools that help you, pivot and things a lot easier than just using a regular shell. So what they're doing is they're setting up the Metasploit interpreter, reverse TCP, and then they're actually running this, and then it connects back to it, and that'll give you the Metasploit connection, okay? And then, so that's one way that they're doing it. Now you're going to notice all of these are the same. There's just differences in how the weaponization is getting there. They're all doing the same thing. They're all calling back and getting us a shell, but there's different ways that they weaponize it. So let's go ahead and look at it. We've covered Windows scripting. We've covered HTA. So now we're going to do Visual Basics for applications. So what's this mean, right? So the Windows scripting, That was Visual Basic as well, but it was a way that we could run Visual Basic code directly. This is Visual Basics for applications. It's different. What that means is this is actually macros. I know you guys have heard macros are dangerous, macros are crazy. A lot of people use macros in corporate environments because they're so helpful. They really are. You can automate so many things. You could take a file and let's say every time you update something, you need this to change or you need an algorithm to run or whatever. It can do all of that for you and it's really nice. But the problem is you can also write code in it. So what they're showing here is they're creating a macro in a Word document, right? And in the macro name, they just choose THM, whatever. And then you can see they're putting here just another message, welcome to the weaponization room. And then they're running the macro themselves here to show it. But what they're showing here is they're showing 3 different ways here that you can actually have it open automatically. So you can see they're having it open on document open, it auto opens, and then it runs welcome to weaponization room. Now, the big thing here is you need to save it as a macro enabled document. Don't save it as regular Word document or else it won't run. So I'm sure many of you have seen this. Macros have been disabled or something has been disabled, whatever, enable content. That's very common. Almost every company is going to at least require you to enable content. The reason is so that you see that security warning and go, oh, hey, I shouldn't do that. The problem is everybody has seen that security warning on every document they open. And because of that, nobody reads it, nobody pays attention, and they just enable it. So if you have a macro written in Visual Basic that gives you a reverse shell and someone enables that content, they don't even know what just happened. They might open the document and it says whatever it says, corporate policies or whatever. And next thing you know, they have a reverse shell and they don't even know it, right? So you can see here's one they're running the calculator again. They're doing that again. And then you can see they open the Microsoft document, they enable content, and boom, calculator opens. And they have no idea why that opened. They don't know what's going on. Now, I will tell you, a lot of large corporations do have macros disabled completely. They will not allow them to run. Some smaller companies do still allow macros. It just depends on the company's policy and whether they trust their employees and that they can detect things correctly, right? So keep that in mind. Now, you can see here, this is another Windows interpreter reverse shell they're creating, but they're creating it in Visual Basic for applications rather than creating it in the other one. So what you can see here is you specify it which match what is the blah, blah. Note that we specify the payload as VBA to use it as a macro. So what does that mean? This will actually put it in a format that you can put in a macro, and you will get a reverse shell in a macro. It's that easy. I mean, that's pretty crazy to think about. Now, important to note, the one modification needs to be done to make this work. The output will be working on a Microsoft Excel sheet. Therefore, change the workbook open to document open to make it suitable for Microsoft Word documents. So it's telling you this is a Microsoft Excel macro. So if you want it to work in Microsoft Windows, I don't know why I just said Microsoft Windows. That doesn't make sense. If you want it to work in Microsoft Word, then you have to change it to document open, not workbook open. Okay? It's that easy. And you can see here, once you do that, it will actually, here's the exploit, the multi-handler. If you guys are familiar, the multi-handler will be listening for the connection. And you can see once it exploits, it's going to go ahead and start the reverse TCP. Boom. And now they have a interpreter shell. So all of that, and once again, Metasploit can do it for us, but we need to know how to do this on our own. And the reason for that is because it's just not smart to only learn Metasploit or something like that, because Metasploit does not always work. All right, so we covered Visual Basics for applications, and the reason I covered it a little bit more than the rest is because Visual Basics for applications, macros, are probably the most dangerous thing on this list, because everyone already understands that PowerShell, command prompt, those type of things are dangerous. Most people understand that. Most people don't understand why macros are so dangerous, okay? So now, PowerShell. I don't even really think I need to explain this. PowerShell is dangerous. PowerShell is the upgrade from the command prompt. It's even more powerful than the command prompt in many ways. But you can see you can run scripts saved as PS1 files, which is the same as, before you could run scripts on command prompt as well on batch files. So you can see that here they're running file try-hack via PS1, and you can see they have it disabled. Okay, so they have cannot be loaded because running scripts is disabled. Okay, that's pretty common. You're going to get scripts are disabled, and the reason for this is because they don't want regular users running scripts on accident, on purpose, whatever. They only want admins to run scripts, right? Well, you can see here that you can set the execution policy to remote signed scope current user blah blah, and it's going to change it. Now you can see what it's asking them. Do you want to change everything? Do you want to suspend it? What do you want to do? And they're just going to go ahead and change it. Now, I will tell you that most companies will not allow you to change this. And when I say they won't allow you to change it, it's because in their policy that they've placed, you're probably, as a regular user, I'm saying, you probably don't have access to open this and start doing this. Now, you might. I'm not saying every company, but most of the time, if you go to set this, it's going to be like, no, you're not changing it unless you're an admin, right? Now, you can see once you actually change it, they execute the bypass. Now, this is common. You're going to see this in a lot of PowerShell scripts that are done hacking-wise. You're going to see this execution bypass, and that's to bypass the actual blockage. Now, it will work sometimes. It won't work all the time, and it all depends on how they have their domain configured, so keep that in mind. So then once they have it, so they've got it, and they are running. You notice that this is their test. It says, welcome to the weaponization room. So you notice they are allowed to run it. Perfect. So now what? Okay, so now on your attack box, download it from GitHub and run a web server to deliver the payload. So here is powercat.git. It's a PowerShell script, basically, that allows you to actually do reverse shells using PowerShell. Now you can see here, they're changing directory into PowerCat, and they're running a Python simple server. This is, all it is a little web server that's going to host just the files in that directory for you so that someone can reach out and grab those files. That's all it is. It's as simple as can be. It is the simplest web server, and we're going to show it here in a second. Okay. Now you can see they set up a reverse shell. So they have the reverse shell, and they have these files sitting out there. Now from the victim machine, we download the payload. So now they just download it. So you can see this is just a PowerShell, and you can see this is just a simple file or a simple string to download the text from. And here they're using you see that it's up here. It's actually served on port 8080 with Python 3 simple server. Here they're calling on that, and they're saying, I want to run PowerCat PS1. And then you can see you've got to give it some commands. You got to give it PowerCat, attack box, port, and then what do you want? And they want to execute the command prompt. And then you see, as soon as they do that, this is their netcat listener. It's listening, boom, boom. And then here you go. You have a reverse shell. Now, the one thing I'm going to tell you guys, especially with PowerShell and things like that, if you're doing actual red teaming, if you're doing pen testing, use these tools sparingly. And when I say sparingly, they're great tools. You should try them. You should absolutely try them. You should take this tool and try it, especially in a pen test. But the reality is most of these tools are known out there to vendors. Most of these tools are known to most companies. And because of that, most of their signatures are in many endpoint detection, antivirus, all that stuff. So if you tried to run just PowerCat PS1 and no changes, nothing, it might just pick right up on the signature and say, no, that's PowerCat. We're not doing that. So just keep that in mind when you guys are running this. Now, we're going to talk about command and control. So now we've weaponized it, and then we need to get it to command and control. Now, a lot of times, what you're going to do, especially Cobalt Strike is definitely the Mac Daddy of command and control, in my opinion. PowerShell Empire is very nice as well. Metasploit is limited, very limited, but it is a C2 server, basically. But the reality is, what happens is let's say you get a reverse shell, right? You need to get that reverse shell to your C2 command, right? Because what happens if you get a Metasploit shell and you're like, oh, that's cool. Well, now what? You can't take over any other machines. Let's say you're trying to do an entire domain, right? Well, you can pivot and try and keep the sessions open, but Metasploit is finicky. It's not perfect, right? It's used for kind of one host, maybe two here and there. But yes, you could run a bunch, but I wouldn't trust it personally comparatively to a C2 controller. PowerShell, Empire, and Cobalt Strike, you can have that server running for a while and point all of your payloads to them. So you could have Cobalt Strike running up in a cloud, and then you could say, okay, I want this reverse shell, but you're pushing all of those reverse shells back to Cobalt Strike, not to your machine. And then when you go back to Cobalt Strike, you have 15 different machines that you can control now, right? So that's the point of a C2 server. It makes things so much simpler. It's less complicated. It's less convoluted. And you guys can read about this if you want. All right, so delivery techniques. And I know you guys probably know these, but I'm telling you, you have no idea how easy this can really be if people don't pay attention. That's all it is. It's just paying attention. That's all it is. Noticing little things. Email delivery. If you guys, I always reference Darknet Diaries because I think Jack does an amazing job running that podcast and just telling the stories. I think he does a phenomenal job. So I always say Darknet Diaries because it's what's in my head because I listen to it every time it comes out. But if you listen to the last one, the last Darknet Diaries, he actually talks about how a guy scammed Google and Facebook out of hundreds of millions of dollars, and all he did was send them an email. He sent them an email. He changed the domain to look just like the one that they thought it would come from and told them to change their invoices. And it's an awesome story. You guys should check it out. But all that is an email delivery, and he tricked two of the largest companies in the world, right? This wasn't people not paying attention. This was people not paying attention, but I'm saying this wasn't like just slubs, sitting there working at an IT help desk in a company of two people. This was the biggest company in the world, and all he did was send an email and did some research on it. Now, granted, there's more to it than what he did, but what I'm saying is that's how easy it can be if you don't pay attention. So pay attention when you're getting emails and things. Now, you have web delivery. That's what we talked about before. You go to a website, boom, download a file, and next thing you know, there you go. And what happens too is hackers will take over websites and then put their malware in that website so that you'll download it. And it might be a legit website, but they got hacked. Okay, so if you download malware on accident from a website, it doesn't mean that website was purposely doing it. Keep that in mind. That website could be hacked and it may need to be reported. All right, and then you have USB delivery. This is extremely common as well. Why? Because everybody plugs in their USB, and especially nowadays with the Oh My God cable, if you guys aren't familiar, it looks like a phone charger, and you plug it in, and it can run payloads just like anything else. The Rubber Ducky, we've done that on this channel. We've also done a Patreon video of how to make scripts on Rubber Ducky, and it's so easy to do that it's very dangerous. So keep that stuff in mind. This is how you're going to get that payload to them. All right, so now we're to the practice arena. So we've got the machine started. Let's go ahead and get my attack box. Boom. All right, so we've got my attack box. So let's go ahead and clear this out and then clear this one out. All right, so first things first, user simulation. So it looks like there's a website we need to go to. So let's go ahead and go to the website. Okay, perfect. So here's a user simulation. So what that means is we can upload files, and then they'll execute it for us. So what that is basically some websites like forums and things like that allow you to upload files to them, right? So if you upload a file that is the proper format that can do a reverse shell, every time someone goes to that page, it's going to give you a reverse shell. So that is what they're doing here. You can upload the files, and then they'll automatically execute it for you just so you are aware of what's going on. And this is the one we're going to do because this is the only one that's different. I think these three are all pretty self-explanatory. You upload a file, someone clicks on that file, runs the file, and there you have a link. Now this one is your HTA malicious link. So what that is we're going to actually serve it up on our simple server, like I said. So you can see if I go here, hit LS, this is the Try Hack Me HTA file. Now, if you're wondering how I did that, I literally just copied this one here so that you guys can see it. I did Microsoft, I always say that. MS Venom, Jesus. And then I did TAC P for payload, Windows 64 shell reverse TCP, and then L host, which is my IP, and you can see on the attack box, my IP is right up top, 10.10.166.237. And then the port, I did port 123, or maybe 1234, I don't even remember. And then the file was HTA-PSH, and then I named it THM-HTA. Boom. So I did the exact same thing they did, so that way you guys can recreate this perfectly. Okay, and that's sitting there. Now what we need to do is we need to actually go ahead and serve this to the people. And you guys can't even see the HTML, or I'll just keep hitting LS so that you guys can. There you go. Okay, so right there. There it is, tryhackme.hta. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're just going to go here and we're going to serve it. Now, you can see Python 3 tacm http.server. Now, what this is going to do is just serve this as a web server, and I'll show you guys what that means. So if we just go to 127.0.0.1 and we say 8090, and the reason I didn't do 8080 is because that's where our netcat listener is going to be listening to. And you can see this is actually serving up my directory. And you can see these are all the directories. Now, what you guys are probably confused by is all these dot files, because you don't see those when I hit LS. Those are hidden files, that's all. But you can see, if we look for it, there it is, tryhackme.hta. So now if I click on it, it's going to run it, and then therefore give us a reverse shell. Now, I'm not going to click on it and run it here, because obviously I'm going to give myself a reverse shell to myself. It doesn't make any sense. So that is sitting there, that is served up, and it's waiting for people to grab it. So then what we need to do is set up our netcat listener. So our netcat listener, we're doing port 1234, and I always do LVNP. They show it as LVN, I think. I don't think they had the P in there or something. Either way, it doesn't really matter. So you hit enter. So now we're listening, we're waiting for it, and then we're serving up right here the actual HTTP file, or HTA file, excuse me. So now when we go here, we'll move this down here. We need to give it a URL. Now we're serving it up here. And then you can see here, I already put it in there before. So here is my IP. And then we're serving it on port 8090. Now, remember, the reason we're serving it there is because that is where this HTTP server is open to. And you have to make sure this is right, thm.hta. So now when I send it, what they're going to do is they're going to actually download it for you and run it. Now you can see, link has been visited, go home. Okay, cool. So now we're sitting here. Now keep in mind, they have to download it and run it. And look at that. We just got a reverse connection. So now we're on a Windows machine. Look at that. So we've taken over the box. And all that had to happen was someone had to run that file. So what we're going to do is we're going to cd, and we're going to go and get the flag. Now, whoops. Now keep in mind that most of the time, TryHackMe puts them on the desktop. So that's why, and I think it's called, yeah, TryHackMe. So we'll just go into desktop. All right, and then you see flag.txt, flag.txt, and there's our flag. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you here is they do mention here to migrate the interpreter shell. This is always true when you're taking over a box with interpreter. Always check what process you took over, because you probably need to migrate it. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, go back and do the interpreter box, or look at it, because I'm not going to explain everything, but basically when you get an interpreter session, if you take over a flimsy process, meaning the process might crash because it's being used unintendedly, things like that, you need to get into a process that is more stable, because the sessions will break a lot. You'll see this a lot of times if you guys just lose sessions, or if all of a sudden your Metasploit isn't working on that session, that type of thing. You need to migrate it, okay? And they're telling you how to do it here. So you can see here they're actually migrating it into... So it's starting on servicehost.exe, and they're migrating it to notepad.exe. Now, what that means is they're actually, when someone opens up their task manager, it'll look like Notepad's open, but it's not. It's it using that as a ruse, basically. Now, I didn't do a interpreter session here. I just did a regular netcat listener because I knew I could get the flag that way. But if you do a interpreter session and it keeps crashing on you or something like that, then you need to migrate it. And you can see right here, they're telling you why, because this opens the Word document and it's going to be closed within 90 seconds. So when it closes, it's probably going to kick you out. So you need to migrate that session as soon as you get it, okay? Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Hopefully you guys like this video. I think this is a very good way to understand weaponization and understand what they're trying to get across. And it's that there's a lot of different ways to weaponize things, but they all have a goal, right? You have a goal. Now let's figure out how to weaponize it, right? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Hopefully you guys have a great day. And thank you guys again for the support. Thank you guys.